Hello, my name is Akash Pasricha. I'm a reporter at The Information, and I am so excited to welcome you to TITV, where we are the first in tech news and analysis, talking not just with our reporters, but also their sources about the breaking tech stories of the day. Now, this is our first episode, but the way the show is going to work, we're going to go live every day at 10 a.m. Pacific. We're going to have VCs, founders, experts, executives. By the way, Mark Zuckerberg is coming on the show in half an hour, so do not go anywhere for that. We're going to take you inside the most important companies in tech. And if you miss any of it live, don't worry about it. There'll be a ton of clips on social media after, and we'll be right there in your podcast feeds right after we finish taping. I want to thank AWS, Amazon Web Services, who is our presenting sponsor for the show. And with that, let's do today's show. It is Monday, July 14th. We've got a heck of a lineup for you. We've got Conviction Sarah Guo, who is coming on to talk about AI. We've got Hinge Health CEO Dan Perez coming on to talk about the future of digital health. Of course, we've got Mark Zuckerberg joining us for a very special conversation. He's going to be talking to our CEO and founder, Jessica Lessin. But I want to start with the biggest story of the weekend. The Information was the first to report on Friday that Google is paying $2.4 billion to swallow up Windsurf, the company behind AI coding tool Codium. Of course, I say swallow because technically Google got the IP, they got the CEO, they got a bunch of stuff, but it is not an acquisition, folks. Do not call it an acquisition. I want to bring on our venture capital reporter and the author of our Dealmaker newsletter, Natasha Mascarenhas, who has been on the phone all weekend, not just about this deal, but also talking about SpaceX's $2 billion investment in xAI. Natasha, how are you feeling on this Monday morning? Welcome to the show. I think we're having a couple of technical difficulties here. I think we're going to bring on Natasha in just a second here to talk about the Windsurf deal. Natasha, can you hear me? All right. So while we figure that out, why don't we? So we got a bunch of headlines to get through. It was a very, very busy weekend. I want to bring up a story here that The Information just broke this morning. So ByteDance, a company we're all very familiar with, they are now developing mixed reality goggles. Okay, this is, of course, an area that a lot of tech companies are going after. Meta themselves we know that they have been very popular with their Quest product. They're also developing mixed reality goggles, though. They're hoping to get their product online in 2026. ByteDance, the fact that they're going after Meta, I mean, it's yet another time that ByteDance is trying to figure out how they can take part of Meta's market share. I think we've got Natasha's audio fixed, so I want to go over to her. Natasha, can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly, Akash. Happy to be here.
All right, we're working on this, folks, and Natasha can hear me, folks. There we go. Launch day, and we're figuring it out in real time. So, Natasha, take me back to Friday. I mean, when did you start hearing rumblings that there was a big deal happening with Windsurf at all?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's been months since the news first broke that OpenAI was looking at acquiring Windsurf, so we definitely were asking the question consistently to get an update. But on Friday afternoon, within minutes, me and my colleague, Miles Krupa, started getting pings from sources about a rumor going through Silicon Valley. The deal was off, and something had to happen next with Windsurf. And so soon we found out that the exclusivity agreement between OpenAI and Windsurf had expired, and Windsurf was likely looking for a new home. And then by that afternoon, we obviously confirmed that Google had stepped in to acquire Windsurf for $2.4 billion. Sorry, not the word acquire, but a version of acquisition.
We can't say acquire, of course. It's the funny thing about these deals that are becoming very popular. I want to ask you about this idea of an acqui-hire. I mean, yeah. This is, I think, what, the third, fourth, fifth deal we've seen of this kind. It's not an acquisition. I'm wondering, what happens to all the investors in Windsurf?
Totally. I mean, for the longest time, there were three ways that a company could exit. It would be IPO, acquisition, or being shut down entirely. And now we have a fourth. So it's a good question, Akash, and I think people are still wondering exactly what this means for all stakeholders in the business. what we can report is that investors are receiving a return on their investment. Kleiner Perkins, which invested around 100 million into the company, is expected to receive around 3 times its initial investment. And Green Oaks, the biggest investor in the company, owns about 20% of in the business as well. And now, meanwhile, we have some of the vested employees receiving payouts as well.
I was going to ask you, tell us about how the employees shake out in all this.
Yeah, I think this has been what blew up on X this weekend. What happens to employees who are not joining Google as part of the deal? A lot of times you see an acquisition bring on a significant amount of employees, maybe all of them, or you're sort of acqui-hiring the team. In this case, it's Windsurf CEO, its co-founder, and some of its research and development team. So the remaining employees at Windsurf have to figure out what's next. There's around 100 million in the bank, likely more, as we reported this weekend. And so there is a remaining company that employees are figuring out. And for those who joined in the last 12 months, they are not expected to receive any payout from this deal because they're not vested, while the vested employees who remain at the company are expected to receive some capital for their shares.
I want to talk about the CEO here. In these acqui-hire deals that have happened, the CEO has been a central figure that has been part of the story. You had Alexander Wang at Scale AI. You had Noam Shazir. That was, he's now leading Gemini at Google. What do we know about the CEO, Varun Mohan, the CEO of Windsurf?
Yeah, listen, it's been a little over 4 years since Varun co-founded the company with a small team. He's in his 20s, I believe. He is now going to be joining Google and really working on what he was doing in-house at Windsurf, which is building the best models and product for coding. The way that it was described to us was that he'll be focusing on agentic coding. And of course, some of the same founding team that he had sort of started Windsurf with will remain with the company and figure out what happens next to the remaining business, which is, expected to really focus on doubling down on enterprise sales. To me, the big question is, what is a remaining Windsurf without a lot of its technical talent, or at least a significant portion of its technical talent? Everything we talk about in VC reporting and AI reporting these days is the power of having technical people on staff. And now Google definitely has that, and Windsurf needs to figure out how to retain those that have that and how to move on without a lot of them.
There was another big deal over the weekend, this time in the land of Elon Incorporated. SpaceX is investing $2 billion in Elon Musk's xAI. The deal comes just a few months after xAI bought X, and then we had news also this weekend, Elon saying that he would do a shareholder vote to see if Tesla would invest in xAI. What are VCs making of this deal?
Investors that I spoke to over the weekend said this is business as usual. Obviously, everything that you just listed out is somewhat stunning of a list of synergies that Elon Musk has made and made occur between all of his companies. That said, to your point, a lot of it's still a huge deal, right? So SpaceX, not known for investing in companies, this is expected to be one of its first known investments in xAI. So a lot of people are watching to see other ways that Elon is merging and blending his companies. Elon also tweeted that, Elon posted on X that Grok will be the voice and brain for Tesla's humanoid robots. And so I think we are going to see a lot more happening here. And yeah, so far from investors, a lot of thumbs up emoji.
All of this kind of reminds me of a really great story that we published back in 2023, which was basically about how all of Musk's companies are interconnected. And it's not just the stakes that one company takes in another company. It's the personnel, it's like the resources that they buy from each other. It is a very interconnected web. I'll tell you what, we'll put the story in the show notes. I think it's a great story. You guys should check it out. Natasha, I want to thank you for joining us. I know that you've got a lot of more calls to make, so once you learn more about which company is going to be the next to get acqui-hire, whatever we're calling it, we will call you back to the show. So for our next guest, folks, and just a reminder, if you're just joining us, that Mark Zuckerberg is joining us at 1:30 Eastern Time, 10:30 Pacific. Our next guest is a very established AI investor. Sarah Guo is an investor at Conviction, a venture capital firm founded in 2022. The firm has backed some well-known companies like Harvey, HeyGen, Sierra, and Mistral. Sarah, I want to thank you so much for being here. Sarah, I just want to make sure you can hear us, right?
I can hear you great.
Okay, great. So, look, Sarah, I mean, you run this podcast. It's a great podcast. I've been listening to it recently. One of the latest guests you had was Parker Conrad, and one of his comments that was kind of interesting to me actually was this idea that AI is not going to shrink the workforce in ways that maybe people might imagine. He was talking specifically about software engineers in this discussion. I'm trying to sort of square that with like enterprises who are customers of AI, and they say, well, you got to show me cost savings, you got to show me ROI. The clearest way to do that is by cutting headcount, and it's not the prettiest solution, but it's the way that we're evaluating this technology. So help me square these two things. I mean, what did you make of his comments?
Yeah, so the way I read it is that we're like really, really early in AI for software engineering. It's actually the first killer use case for AI. For some of the labs, they think CodeGen will be more than $1 billion of revenue for them end of this year. But like code generation, the way people are using it mostly today, like you auto-complete the next couple lines of my function, is not most of the software engineering job. And so I think one of the things that Parker was alluding to is like all of the things that take the hundreds and thousands of people in big engineering teams are really like coordination and platform engineering and maintenance and context, like sharing, not just writing the next line of code. And so if we want AI to have better ROI for software engineering, we need to go take on a lot of that.
Right. I mean, I think it was really, an interesting point. One of the other things and by the way, I've just been listening to your podcast, watching your Twitter. I mean, there's a lot of really exciting content you put out. Not the least of which was a tweet that you put out this weekend. The tweet was, "Fixing AI slop turns out to be as painful as fixing your own slop." Can you help me understand what AI slop is and what you might have meant by that?
Yeah, well, I was expressing my own frustration, either writing code or writing an essay, for example. I think a lot of people think the first version of that, or just putting the work on paper, is really hard. I think if you want high quality code, then you refactor, you review, you revise if you're writing and a journalist or working on an essay or something. I was writing an internal investment memo this weekend and was also, shipping some software for us. And in both cases, obviously my first instinct was to go use the AI tools. But maybe to Parker's point, like a lot of these things, they still take higher level work and reasoning. And I think we're going to get there. But slop is like, you have that first draft, but it is not that good. It takes you just as much work to go fix it and make it the quality you really want.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, this is a thing that we talk about in the newsroom all the time. I mean, getting behind using AI is really hard when, like you say, you got to fix the thing that the AI gets wrong. And it's actually something that I'm excited to talk about one of our guests later in the show about, Dan Perez, the CEO of Hinge Health. I mean, we're going to talk about AI and doctors and medicine. And so, obviously you can't make mistakes there. So it's something to think about.
I think one of the really,
let's go back a bit to our discussion with Natasha. I mean, The Google Windsurf deal, we've seen it before. Did it surprise you at all?
I don't think so. Like, we were just talking about like code and software engineering as a killer use case for AI. It's structured reasoning, like with language. It's
Right.
No wonder it's ground zero for AI competition. And especially now, like, speed matters. They have a great model at Google. More and more people are using Gemini, and like from a quality perspective, it's really strong. But Google needs to buy product velocity, and Windsurf has it.
Right, and I mean, I guess the question I have for you is, like, as far as startups go, I mean, how do you think this impacts the startup ecosystem, these types of deals happening?
Yeah, in general, I'd say like any opportunity for startups to get liquidity is a good thing for innovation, right? The way you think about this as a VC, and the way I encourage people to think about it as like, early startup team members, is there's a distribution of outcomes for any company. And you want to like work for a company where you believe in the team and the mission, and the tail of the distribution, like how can it become something that's really ambitious? But you need all of those outcomes in the distribution, including acquisitions or non-acquisitions, licensing deals, to encourage entrepreneurs and team members to take risks. And so like, if we want that innovation, like, we need outcomes and liquidity on timelines that make sense to entrepreneurs and to the employees and investors.
So I guess, this sort of half outcome where, it's not an acquisition, it's not an IPO, it's something in the middle. I mean, you actually view it as very beneficial for the startup ecosystem, and maybe even a way of sort of getting around some of the current regulations in place. Am I reading it right?
I think it's objectively been very hard for the hyperscale internet companies, the Magnificent Seven, et cetera, to acquire anything for more than 5 years from a regulatory perspective. And not just in the US, they've had to deal with global regulators. And like, there's the concern about being blocked. And then in a field that's as fast moving as AI, speed to collaboration also matters, right? If you're in like a year plus cycle of approval, some of these companies, like, they didn't really exist, or the product certainly didn't work or had traction a year ago. And so what I would say is, like, if you are like treating the participants responsibly, employees, investors, et cetera, like, I think more liquidity is better for the ecosystem. If you shut down every startup exit or liquidity opportunity, you don't protect innovation, you strangle it. You just like solidify the market structure of the big players.
And how do you square that with, this idea that, this is kind of the big tech companies getting bigger at the end of the day? I mean, what do you say to that argument?
Yeah, it really goes back to like the distribution of outcomes to make people like take risk. I'm a huge believer in market incentives. If we shut down every startup exit, we don't protect innovation, we strangle it. The reality is, like, having those off ramps for companies makes taking that risk way more tenable. Most companies get acquired, they do not become public. And so the giants that we have today, they also had acquisition opportunities. And some entrepreneurs are they're just going to choose not to sell the company, not to license the company, and to stay on the train. And they'll be our next set of huge winners. At least that's the bet we make at Conviction.
Yeah, no, I see your point there. I want to ask you about, you've been doing venture a long time, and when I started at The Information, I actually started out covering crypto, and one of the things that I covered was the ways in which venture capital changed with crypto. I mean, you had a lot of these funds turning into RIAs so that they could invest in and buy these public tokens, I guess, if you will. That was one way in which crypto changed venture capital. I want to get your sense on how you think AI has changed venture capital altogether.
Yeah, I guess I would be very biased here, and I believe that it's changing venture fundamentally. We started a new fund in Conviction because we thought that this was a period of time where being close to research and understanding how technology translated into business outcomes was going to be a huge advantage. If you just really focused on it. And it's a technically deep field. It's like really opaque to people who don't come from AI. And by investing in that and focusing on the ecosystem, like we could have conviction, we could take more directed bets on the types of businesses that would really matter. And so as an example, like we have made investments in domains that I don't think people would have thought of as like the largest categories of software before. You mentioned Sierra and Harvey, like contact centers or legal software were not necessarily like the biggest categories before. But if you think about, the expansion of capability for businesses that comes from like infinite resource in these functions of better and better quality, like then the business makes sense to you. And so I think there's some structural things that are happening too, where like companies like Cursor and Windsurf like are getting to traction very quickly. Harvey and Sierra have grown really quickly. Cognition's grown really quickly. And so there's more and more of this like need to get into great companies early in order to be part of the journey at all.
As it relates to AI investing, I mean, that's something you spend almost all your time on at Conviction. I mean, what pockets of AI are you really focused on right now?
Yeah, one thing that we and I think a lot of like really interesting entrepreneurs are focused on are the idea of these like compound systems that will do end-to-end workflows, not just like generate text or answer a question in a single shot. And that might still be, I think everybody listening to the information TV show will have heard of deep research, where you can like basically ask OpenAI to think harder and use the web to figure out how to get a more complex, deeper answer for you on something. And that could be like shopping, or it could be how does this ML thing work? But I think that one of the biggest things that we've been focused on is like what types of work match really well to this deeper reasoning. And like I think the interfaces for a lot of functions might start with search and simple question answering, but they're just going to get more sophisticated, more workflow oriented. I think you mentioned you're going to have the Hinge Health founder on here as well. Like we think healthcare is super prone for disruption right now, given how legacy some of the workflows and interfaces are there. And so if it's companies like Open Evidence, like serving doctors, or companies like Latent Health in the pharmacy space, I think there's huge value to be captured.
One of the things I wanted to get your take on is, as it relates to these acqui-hires, Scale AI was in the data labeling space, Windsurf is in the coding space. We've got other companies that are just foundation model companies that are getting a lot of interest from the big tech companies. I mean, help me, let's think out loud here. I mean, what do you think that big tech companies need more of right now? I'm kind of trying to forecast, what pocket of AI they might look to go after next for one of these big deals.
Yeah, I think the Windsurf deal is an example of the need to verticalize. Like raw intelligence without product and user understanding is like brain without hands, right? Like it's useful, but it's not nearly as useful as like, full entity AI doing things for you. And I think one thing that happens naturally in these labs is they get really, really far away from the use case. And like this is a little bit in the weeds, but the capabilities might be in one of these foundation models, but you need somebody who really understands like what does a journalist want? What does a doctor want? What is a good answer for them? And knowing how to evaluate what's useful from the end user perspective, and then manipulate or post-train, like generally like collect more data or do RL or create environments for these models to help them better answer the doctor or the lawyer in specific. Like that's a very different capability. And I think doing that with velocity is not something that the large companies like necessarily have as DNA today. You need the velocity of AI and the attachment to the user.
I want to ask you very quickly, and by the way, just a reminder to folks, if you're just joining us, Mark Zuckerberg is joining us in just about 5 minutes for a very special conversation with our editor-in-chief, Jessica Lessin. We've got Sarah Guo here with us from Conviction. Long before you were doing, focused on AI investing, you were an early investor in Figma. That's a name that we all know very well these days. The company is going to go public probably any day now. I just want to get your take on the IPO markets, broadly speaking. I mean, Figma, and I should say, we had my colleague Corey Weinberg had a great profile and story about Figma and how it's sort of the one of the biggest names to go public recently. It has the opportunity to really crack open the IPO gates once and for all. I might ask this to Dan Perez later because he just went public, but what do you think? I mean, Figma goes public. Is this the one that finally swings the doors open?
I think none of us are in control of the macro environment, but from a fundamentals perspective, if you look at Figma's growth rate and stickiness and the markets that attach to design, the opportunity they have to go after, it's clearly like a very premium company with amazing growth and amazing margins, right? We have not had, there are not enough growers like that in the public markets, and investors have appetite for it. And so I think we will see what the reception is, but if what people are looking for is like a premium secular technology company that's really ambitious, and that's what it takes to open the IPO markets, that's what we're going to get.
Right. Do you keep in touch with Dylan at all? Have you spoken to him all recently?
Yeah, Dylan's a very close friend. We've worked together for 10 years, so yes, he supports the fund as well.
Great. I'm going to let you go in just a minute. I want to ask you, very quickly, about chips. Do you guys do any chip investing at all, or are you guys mostly software focused?
We certainly look. I think it is a more interesting time in infrastructure than it has been in 20 years, right? You had a increasingly mature CPU, general purpose computing ecosystem, and now you have all kinds of accelerators that fit matrix multiplication and AI. And people have seen this has obviously skyrocketed NVIDIA to become the company it has, and created all sorts of efforts both in the clouds and independently. I think the most interesting thing around chips that's happening right now is you have not enough supply anywhere of chips or power. You have all of these vendors, really because NVIDIA wants there to be this healthy ecosystem, and the cloud providers want their own supply. And so I think there's a reason for aggregation at the infrastructure layer that there was never before, right? And so you have companies like Base 10 in the AI inference layer that are growing super fast. Right. We will certainly keep looking at chip innovation, but you also are making architectural bets on what is going to work 2 years from now, given the chip design.
Right. Well, look, I know chip investing is it's a whole nother ballgame as it relates to hardware. I personally am pretty excited about all these NVIDIA challengers popping up. Sarah, I want to thank you so much for being here. We look forward to having you on the show, and best of luck with everything at Conviction. I'm really excited to introduce our next guest. Mark Zuckerberg needs no introduction. He has been a busy man lately. He has been doling out hundreds of millions of dollars to get top AI researchers at Meta. He's also spent billions of dollars to take bite-sized pieces out of the top growing AI companies. I want to welcome our CEO and editor-in-chief, Jessica Lessin, who is here for a very special conversation with him to comment on all this for the first time. Jessica, let's turn it over to you. Folks, I'm really sorry to jump in here. I think we don't have sound from our interview with Mark Zuckerberg and Jessica Lessin. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to figure it out in just a minute. We're gonna call the show there just for today. Dan Perez, the CEO of Hinge Health, I'm so sorry we couldn't get to you, but it's a conversation that I am really excited to have. I mean, Hinge Health is up nearly 50% since its IPO. It's a company that is playing in the wearable space and in digital health. Dan, I promise we're going to have you on the show later this week, but for now we're going to end it there. Thank you so much for tuning into TI TV, and we'll be back on this space tomorrow at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. Thank you, and see you later, Silicon Valley.